beside the river. Plant yourself beside the river. Each of you, descendant of some past.
Ready to Love DC. The first embarrassing situation we saw in episode 2 was Tyrone trying to impress upon Sabrina with a song that he knew in Korean, because she was born in Korea and he was stationed in the army out there. He did try to sing it. She looked at him to say, "No, I don't know that song." A little bit embarrassing. But well, what can I say? Not too sure she was impressed. We then saw Walter enter the party, and Sabrina and Walter's eyes locked. Them two looked like they were into each other, so we're going to have to wait and see how these two progress. We later saw again Walter speaking with Tissia, and Naeem as well was part of the conversation too. After seeing Tissia, Naeem turned around and said to the camera that he loved women that are very shapely. But hang on, didn't you say you like fit women? Which one is it? Make up your mind. Oh dear. I did, however, notice that with Tissia, she was more engrossed with talking with Walter than with Naeem. So I think Naeem got the hint and disappeared. The next conversation we saw was with Corey and Courtney. Yeah, Courtney. Corey, he was trying to charm the pants off her, and she was letting him. Courtney, what are you doing? Mr. Player, what are you doing with him? She actually turned around and said he was her type. Oh, Courtney, I was rooting for you. I really was. He then smoothly asked for her phone number, and she gave it without any hesitation whatsoever. Oh dear. I give up. It was shortly after that Tommy, the host, walked in. To cut a long story short, he told them to mingle, get to know each other, because 2 of you are going home tonight. Yes, 2. Did you see how Corey didn't waste any time? Straight after that, he was ready to mingle. It was Courtney and, oh God, what's her name? Kerry. Courtney and Kerry were sitting down together. The same Courtney he was just flirting with. He went to Kerry, that was sitting next to her, and said, "Oh, I've got something. I was supposed to give you something earlier. Can you come with me, please?" Something like that, he said. This man is suave. Oh my God, he is slick. Kerry, however, did follow him. She did think it was strange. He then turned around and said to her whether she was free Friday or Sunday. Oh my God, this man, Mr. Player. She's thinking, hang on. Did I blink my eyes? Hang on, where did this come from? Because they haven't even chatted, and already he's asking her for a date. Does he even know her surname? Does he know anything where she's from? Does he know nothing? No. He hasn't even got to know her yet, and already he's asking for her number. Yes, that's what he did next. He asked for her number, and I believe she gave it. We're going to have to wait and see what happens next. The next conversation we saw was with Carrington and Tissia. These two started off on a nice note with all the flirting. Then came the serious talk. Miss Tissia wasn't playing. She went in asking the same question in maybe 3 or 4 different ways. I like her style. But she used it on the wrong person. That type of style of interrogation I would have used on Mr. Corey, Mr. Player. Carrington The poor guy was sweating. Mr. Carrington had his back against the wall with her. He didn't know how to respond. It was all too much. That was just too full on. Miss Tissia, you need to calm that. Calm it down. You're going to scare them away with that tactic. Calm it down. Mr. Carrington, I'm not sure about you anyway. I did say in my preview, something not quite right there. Mr. Socialite, you've got a good game. You know how to talk to a woman. You know how to woo them. Yeah, I'm not sure you're ready. Not for a full commitment. The next conversation we saw was with Camille and Cornelius. Not too sure how this is going to go. Mr. Godley and Miss Black Widow. What a combination. With these two, we saw a little flirtation at the beginning. I saw Miss Black Widow saying to Mr. Cornelius, guess how old I am? How old are you? You're 42. But you're behaving like you're, 12? Guess how old I am? Oh, stop it. Stop it. They carried on to talk about their careers and their background. And the one thing they did have in common, they did have a bit of artsy about them. She does all drama and musicals, and he has a bit of modelling behind him. So they sort of blended on that tip. And then she turns around when she was talking to the camera saying she's found her new boyfriend. Oh God, I pray to God. I do. Mr. Cornelius, run. Run as fast as you can. Miss Camille has got her eye on you. She's starting to cast her web. Miss Black Widow. That conversation continued with her asking him to go and check the food and to bring her some food back. And at the same time, she said to him, don't be talking to anybody over there. Come straight back. Come straight back. Oh, she's ready. She's casting her web. That woman is not playing. He then turns around talking to the camera saying that he doesn't want to put all his eggs in one basket. He's dating with a purpose. Mr. Cornelius, you keep thinking like that. Keep thinking like that. Don't let her sway you. I'm praying for you. The next conversation we saw was Libba talking to Tyrone. Yeah, the military guy. Not much conversation going on there. He comes across quite dry to me. Maybe a nice person, but there's not much conversation. Yeah. Can't quite gel at the moment with him. Then you saw Libba talking to Carrington, Mr. Socialite. She had all the smiles there. You could see that she was more into him than he into her. Not too sure how that was going to work. Yeah, we're going to have to see whether this progresses anywhere. The next conversation we saw was with Lamont and Shiloh. These two were talking more about their careers and their life journey. Not too sure whether there was any flirtation there, but they seem to have a nice deep conversation going on. So we're going to have to wait and see whether this really develops into anything more. Moving on, we again saw Walter and Tissia having a conversation. Tissia was continually flirting with Walter. Walter is a nice guy though. He would be somebody I would approach. Well, I wouldn't approach him, but I'll let him know that I'm interested. Let's put it that way. But her flirtation, yeah, you could see it all. She's liking Walter. She described him as, God, what's the word she used? Exquisite. Exquisite. Yes, that's the word she used. I thought, are you complimenting the chef on his meal? What? But yeah, that's the word she used. Exquisite. She then continued with the conversation by asking him whether he was interested in children. He turned around and said yes. And that's where Walter went into his past relationship, about his wife dying, etc. And that sort of, again, pulled at my heartstrings, pulled at Tisia's heartstrings, and she could see the vulnerability behind it all, and that even pulled her in even more. He then continued to talk about how he went off the rails, he was wilding out, all of that. He's gone into therapy, got over that, and he's dated in between. He's come very close in regards to probably getting engaged, etc. And how he's dodged a few bullets in regards to relationships we're talking here. He's dodged a few bullets. Tisia then continued to ask him whether he had a type. He didn't have a type. And you could see that she liked the thought that he didn't have a type. She then continued to ask him whether he had a love language. And he said touch. That gave her the opportunity to touch him. Yes, she did. Very gently on the shoulder. And they giggled behind it. And that was the end of that conversation. Tisia, I like the questions you asked. He was so simple and open to answer the questions. It wasn't an interrogation. It was very subtly done. I loved it. That is my type of conversation. Tisia, I'm proud of you. Next we had Lamont and Aisha. That's it, Aisha. Them two seem to be having a nice sort of conversation. It started off well. They looked like they were getting on. Lamont was very much into her. And then he went into spoken word. And that turned her off. Dear. Not sure what went wrong there. Yes, I do. It wasn't the time or the place. She was having a conversation. Keep it there. Keep it right there. Leave the spoken word for another time. With him doing that, the conversation was cut short. Lamont. You've got a little to learn. I won't say a lot to learn. You've got a little to learn. The next conversation we saw was with Phil and Sabrina. Phil. I actually like Phil, if I remember rightly. Didn't get a chance to see him converse with Sabrina because Mr. Player? What's his name again? Corey came out of nowhere and interrupted their conversation. How dare you? This idiot picked my girl up from her seat, shifted her to the side just slightly in front of my boy Phil and tried to chirp her in front of him. Are you having a laugh? Is this some sort of joke? Was my man being punked? Because this cannot be happening. Please tell me this wasn't happening. Mr. Phil, I could see, was being very courteous. But his cards were marked. With that move there, his cards were marked. Moving on, the next conversation that we had a peek into was with Walter and Sabrina. I don't know where to start with this one. With Walter, he said he's been wanting to speak to Sabrina since the moment he saw her earlier in the day, and finally he got the chance. And then when them two went into conversation, they started talking about their life, and Sabrina talked about how she's a caretaker for her parents, and then he turned around and said his mother died in his arms. He was the carer for his mum the last 3 years of her life, and it went deep. She was in tears. I was in tears just listening. The connection was just right with those two. The connection was just there with those two. She's never felt so vulnerable and open to speak to somebody the way she has with him. The connection was just flawless, organic. I love those type of conversations. I knew it from the beginning. I liked Walter. There was just something about him. I'll say no more. The next conversation we saw was with Courtney and Cornelius. These two seem to be getting on very well, very flirtatious. When speaking to the camera, Courtney did turn around and say that she does love the southern guy. The qualities, the nice guy, very wholesome. Along those lines she was talking. And you could see that she's well into Cornelius. He was definitely ticking her boxes. She could tell that he's just a nice guy. And she feels attracted to that. Lovely, Courtney. You're moving in the right direction. Leave Mr. Corey where he belongs, on the streets. The next conversation we got a peek into was with Libba, Frank and Aisha. But it's mainly Libba and Frank that were speaking initially. A lot of flirtation going on. They were talking about tattoos more than anything else. Comparing each other's tattoos. Libba, you can definitely see, was feeling him. When speaking into the camera, she described him as very confident, very attentive. But he, on the other hand, found her to be a little too bubbly, a little bit too much for him. Yeah, he gave her, what did he give her? Yellow flag. Not quite red flag, but a yellow flag. It was not long after that Libba picked herself up and moved away from the group, which left Frank and Aisha talking. After Libba had left, you could see Aisha was flirting more with Mr. Frank. I'm sure she's into him. She was stroking his beard and all sorts. And he wasn't exactly pushing her away. So there could be a connection going on there. Not too sure at the moment. So we're going to have to wait and see whether that develops into anything. The next conversation we saw was with Naeem and Zadia. Yeah. Them two seem to be getting on quite well, to be honest. Wasn't too sure that she would be his type. But then again, he does like fit people. She's a personal trainer. And then he likes... what's the other girl's name? The curvy girl. I don't think he has a type. He turns around and says he has. But whether he has or not, I'm not too sure I believe him anymore. Plus this girl has weave. I believe it's weave. Or it could be a wig. I really don't know anymore. I thought he was into natural hair. I don't know about him. I'm unsure. But she seems to be into him. She says, yeah, she could see him as her boyfriend. That's exactly what she said. Yes, she did. I think he's still trying to find his way, but they were very flirtatious with each other. So we're just going to have to wait and see whether this develops into anything more. The next couple we saw conversing were Shiloh and Dante. Yeah, Dante. Forgot all about him. These two were having a deep conversation. They were delving into their past, abandonment issues as children. Well, especially Shiloh was. So she was being very vulnerable in front of him. When he was talking to the camera later on, he did say he liked that about her, that she was able to open up, and that looking at her, she's definitely a contender, and she's looking for love. That's really what he said. So them two are very much on the same tip. They've also both got a connection to Trinidad. Her father's from Trinidad and his stepdad's from Trinidad. So, Trini, I hear you. Caribbean, love it. The conversation then steered towards food of the Caribbean, and that Mr. Dante was taught how to cook stew chicken by his stepdad. Let me tell you one thing about Caribbean people. We learn from a very young age, 8, 9, 10, how to cook. There's no separation in the genders. So for Dante to say that he was taught by his stepdad to cook stew chicken was no surprise to me. That is old school tradition. Him and Shiloh definitely had a connection there. And when speaking into the camera, Shiloh did turn around and say she found him very attentive. He was a good listener. which is what she really liked about him. So we're going to have to wait and see how this progresses. But I'm liking the look of these two. I really am. Moving on, the next conversation that we got a peek into was a group conversation with Mr. Player, what's his name? Corey, yes, Corey. Kerry, Moomin, Sabrina, and Tissia. Yeah. So 4 girls and Mr. Player. The conversation was around who people were feeling. And if I remember rightly, Sabrina turned around and said she was feeling Walter. Then someone asked Mr. Player, Corey, who he was feeling. He was saying that he was feeling all the women around here. Then someone threw a curveball in regards to say, but aren't we supposed to be going out on a date? Then 1 or 2 of the other girls jumped in to say, yeah, well, I'm supposed to be going out with you on Friday. And so on Saturday and so on Sunday. Mr. Player, you had the boldness to sit amongst these women and didn't think you'll get caught out? What were you thinking? Dumb or dumber? Which one are you? These same women then started comparing notes. Did he say he felt your energy? Yes! Yes, girl! Yes, he did! He then tried to talk his way out of it with his smooth talking. This guy is hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. He's an absolute joke. Whoever takes him seriously deserves him. Yes, I said it. The conversation came to a close when Shiloh came over. And the girls turned around and asked her, has he asked you out on a date too? And she said, yeah, we had a brief conversation. And that's all they needed to hear. They got off their seats and they dispersed. It was just too funny to watch. It was like, bye, Corey. Bye, Corey. Bye, Corey. This guy is a joke. Absolute joke. Even after all that, he was still going around the villa trying to explain himself. Do you think any of the women were listening? No, they weren't. As he said, every single woman, whichever way he turned, was giving him the stink eye. Yes, they were. He knew he was going home. It was shortly after that Mr. Tommy, the host, came back and had a talk with all the men in the villa. He went round and asked each guy which of the ladies they were feeling. Starting with Phil. Phil turned around and said he liked Sabrina and also Camille. Next it was Cornelius. He said Courtney and Camille. Then it was Dante's turn. He turned around and started naming a list. I lost track at about number 5. And then the host turned around and said, you might as well name all 10. He then changed the question by saying, as a whole to the group, who are you not feeling? It was then that Carrington spoke up and turned around and said he wasn't feeling Tissia. Walter turned around and said he wasn't feeling Kerry because there was no sort of physical attraction to start with. So that was his view. Lamont also turned around and said he wasn't feeling Tissia. Then we had Frank turn around and said he wasn't feeling Libba. Tyrone also turned around and said he wasn't feeling Libba as well. Tommy then moved on and talked with the ladies, and the same questions were fired at them. To start with, it was, who are they feeling? First person to answer that question was Aisha. She said she likes Frank. Then we had Zadia that turned around and said she likes Naeem, and also Walter. Sabrina also said Walter. She said they bonded from the jump. Libba said Dante and also Cornelius. That's when Camille jumped in to say, "That's my boyfriend." Before it became a catfight, Tommy jumped in and asked who were they not feeling. Courtney and Shiloh both said Lamont. Then Zadia turned around and said Tyrone. Then we had maybe 4 or 5 girls said Mr. Cheater, what's his name, Mr. Player, Corey. They said Corey. I was waiting for his name to come up somewhere, please. He has to go. It was afterwards that the whole group of men and women were brought together to find out the result of who's going to leave today. For the men, it ended up being Lamont. It was down to Lamont and Corey. And it was Lamont going home. I'm shocked by that. I am deeply shocked. How did Mr. Corey end up staying? I don't get it. What the hell went wrong? Oh, this doesn't sound right. This don't sound right at all. When it came to the ladies, the choice was between Libba and Tessia. I'm quite surprised to see Tessia in the bottom. Libba, I could sort of understand. And it actually ended up being Libba. Yes, Libba was eliminated. Oh dear, it just wasn't her time. As she said, her man will come with God's timing. Yep, those were her words. And he will. He will. However, in the midst of everybody saying bye to Libba, Miss Tessia was sitting there with a face on her. She just couldn't understand why she was in the bottom 2. As she said to the rest of the ladies, "I've got 4 or 5 numbers. Why are people lying?" She couldn't understand it. At that point, she said, "I just really want to go home." I can understand where she's coming from. If people aren't into her, why give out the phone number? Why give her false hope? Yeah, she's just not into the fake rubbish. She's not into that fake shit. Not at all. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens next time. So on that note, this is where I'm going to leave it. If you like what you heard, please like, comment and subscribe. Till next time.